Welcome back to Destination Fulfillment. I'm Rodney,
I'm Janine.
and today we're going to be discussing making a strong foundation to start a new business. So, before we get into that, we want to go over what's happened with our business, Brood, since our last episode.
So, when we recorded our last episode, we were getting ready to go into a meeting with our potential landlords, a few folks there to answer some questions, get them to know a little bit more about our business plan. So we did that. We had that conversation the following Monday, and I felt like it went well.
Yeah, I agree.
We told them a little bit more about our vision, what we want to do with the space, why Brood is important, why we want to make it a reality. And then they had some other questions for us around P&L, around our marketing plan. So we worked to pull that stuff together and send that over to them by the end of the week. And now they are currently reviewing those documents and our answers to those questions. So we're still kind of in a little bit of a waiting game from that end, but we feel good. And so we started reaching out to some vendors to just start getting the ball rolling on that side of the house. And we've been plugging away at a bunch of documentation and certifications.
Yeah. And like you said, we've been talking to vendors, suppliers of different goods that we plan to provide. We've also been building out some job descriptions so that we can get those posted, so we can get the right people hired in the right positions before we launch. But yeah, it's been kind of a waiting game right now. And I gotta say, like, I know you business owners out there can understand where we're coming from when we're like, the silence is killing us. Like, the waiting is unbearable sometimes.
Yeah, we have this idea and we know in our hearts it's going to be great and we want it to just come to life and all the pieces to come together, but patience is key, and we have to respect the partners that we're working with and the timeline. We also have to respect that we are in the holiday season and everything just kind of slows down in the holiday
Yeah.
season. That's, a little bit of a waiting game. That's to be expected. I don't think anything has been terrible at this point.
Yeah, nothing's been terrible, and nothing feels like it's been deliberate or stalling in any way. I think everybody's just doing their due diligence, and due diligence is something we're going to talk about a little bit in this episode. So now that you kind of know where we're at, I also wanted to touch on the certifications a bit. You mentioned we've been working on some certifications, and if you tuned into our last episode, you know that our business idea for Brood is a coffee shop and tap house. We will also have a full kitchen, a limited menu, but it'll nevertheless be a full kitchen with a staff. And part of those certifications we've been doing has been through ServeSafe.
Yeah, so Rodney and I are both ServeSafe certified, manager certified, which basically means that we have the knowledge and certifications to prove the knowledge that how to serve food safely, how to store food safely, what to look out for as far as time temperature controls and good product, how to keep
Yeah,
it.
cross contamination.
Yeah, how to keep it safe, when to reject from suppliers, all that kind of stuff. So that was really important to us. We're also both now Safe alcohol certified, which really is just a level of knowledge for keeping our customers safe in an alcohol service environment and protecting us as business owners and our employees. Because I think from my time as a bartender, alcohol service can be kind of scary. Like you are actually legally responsible for every person that you serve alcohol to.
Not just while they're in the establishment. If you overserve someone and it's deemed that you are negligible, if they go out and drive and get into an accident, you can be liable for that as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of responsibility with alcohol service, which we knew about. I knew about from my experience being a bartender previously, but we just wanted to make sure that, we were keeping up with any of the new information, and just refreshing. So we both completed those certifications this week, and Rodney finished his Serve Safe Manager certification. I have my Serve Safe Manager certification from the bakery, so I was good on that end. And then we've just been, like Rodney said, plugging away on job descriptions, working on standard operating procedures, employee manuals. We opened up our business bank account.
Yeah, I really just kind of wanted to make sure we touched on the certification part because no matter what your industry is, you need to be aware of what regulations are out there. And even if the certification training is not required by your local regulations or your state, it's a good idea to go through that training, even if it's optional, just to give yourself the best knowledge base that you can before you go and enter into a business where hopefully you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. But, if you're not trained in the process, there's possible gaps.
Yeah, not only are there gaps, but there's legal consequences, right? So, the state doesn't say you have to be Serve Safe Manager certified or Food Service Manager certified, but that is a system that ensures that you know what your risks are and you know how to mitigate them. Because if people get sick from your food, you are legally liable. And also, just like, I would just feel terrible, like personally
Yeah.
terrible. And so it's a measure of protecting yourself, protecting your business, and protecting your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of shifting gears a little bit here and kind of going into the heart of this episode with talking about building a strong foundation for your business, even before you open the doors. I think you can kind of tell that we've been working on doing that ourselves, doing all of the steps and process even before we have our doors open. But we also want to talk about a few differences between different people that you might be working with throughout your process and a couple different avenues that you might take to open your business.
Yeah, so when we first started this process, I think we mentioned it in the last episode, but we started by deciding we were going to acquire a business. So we were going to purchase a business that was either already in operation or, in our case, hadn't opened yet. And we were going to work with some folks in order to acquire this business and then start it up. So to do that, we worked with a broker, a lawyer, and eventually we would have worked with a landlord.
Yeah, so the difference here we're talking about is an acquisition versus a startup. So an acquisition merely means that you are acquiring something. You are acquiring or purchasing something that is already established in some capacity. Whereas a startup is you are getting every single license, every single piece of equipment, all of those things you are doing yourself in a step-by-step process to get your business going. So there are some pros and cons to both. For example, with an acquisition, oftentimes you're paying a large lump sum, but you're able to get that equipment, possibly inventory, different licenses and permits from the city are transferable. So there is some pros and cons to both. Whereas with a startup, you're not saying goodbye to a lump sum of money all at once, and you're not stuck with maybe some subpar equipment and some good equipment. You can kind of get the best of what you want. You feel you can afford refurbished inventory or not inventory, refurbished equipment we can speak to is a very good way to go. New equipment can be expensive.
Yeah, and you can also, if you have an expensive piece of equipment that you need for your business, so for us, our most expensive piece of equipment is going to be the espresso machine. There are a lot of really good, reputable businesses and brands that work together to ensure the longevity of your equipment. So we'll get into equipment maintenance and that stuff in later episodes, but when you're looking to purchase, highly recommend looking and doing your research on secondhand refurbished pieces for very expensive equipment because sometimes they work just fine. Maybe the business shut down and they were selling off their assets. There's a whole lot of reasons why stuff comes in and gets refurbished. But so for us, when we were going through the process of purchasing a business, we did some research, knew what budget we wanted to be in, we knew what area of the city we wanted to be in. So we started looking.
Yeah, and then we went shopping. So we did some online shopping. We found there's several websites out there, but Biz Buy Sell is one of the websites that we went to where we found different listings for businesses that were for sale. And it's not just full businesses. Sometimes it's asset sales. They're selling off a portion. Yeah. So when you go through that, you're going to see the names of the brokers. So basically, just like buying a house, there's a real estate agent. In this case, there's business brokers that are the ones selling the property for the owner. You can also work with a broker as a purchaser. You can have a broker to do some of that shopping for you and that legwork.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we learned through this process was as a buyer, the brokers will really only work with you as a buyer if you're buying over a certain sum of money. So we had reached out to a broker after we found a location that we wanted to put an offer in on, and he was wonderful in the sense that he basically said, hey, this is a great option for you guys. I don't see any red flags, but a single broker representing both the buyer and seller for this lump sum is pretty standard.
Yeah.
We really don't do two brokers in a deal unless it's over a very large sum of money, which are not in the market for that large of a
Yeah,
purchase.
we're not in the $1 million tax bracket, believe me. Not yet, at least.
So once we got that advice, we decided, okay, we'll just reach out to the broker ourselves. So Rodney took the lead on that. He reached out to the broker. She was great to work with, and she got us all the information we needed about the space, about the purchase. And then she said, hey, if you don't have a lawyer, you're going to need a lawyer to enter into the escrow period.
Yeah, and more than just the escrow period. In our case, you need a lawyer to help with the transition of the liquor license, particularly because unfortunately, at least here in Ohio, that process takes an average of 6 to 9 months. So we found out that through this process, we found out that ultimately you are working under the previous ownership's liquor license under what's called a management agreement. And you have to have the attorney set up that management agreement. So there's definitely a need for a lawyer at various stages. And to be perfectly honest, I just appreciate having someone that I can rely on to read all that legal jargon in some of the contracts. Because, I mean, they can get hefty.
Yeah. And in our case, with this purchase that we were looking to do, our lawyer actually and our broker both did a wonderful job in supporting us, but our lawyer specifically found clauses in the contract that we would have eventually worked under for the rental of the space under the landlord that was not in our favor. And she found other pieces with the liquor license that started delaying the process, and she really helped us understand exactly what it was that we were putting an offer into purchase, and really help keep us from honestly making a bad investment.
Yeah. And, you mentioned putting in the offer. That kind of ties into our next topic of due diligence. Once you've put in that offer and the seller accepts your offer, there may be some renegotiating. They may counter offer, But ultimately, once you've come to an agreement with the seller on a dollar figure and they've accepted your offer, you enter what's called the due diligence period. And part of that due diligence period is doing all of your fact checking, all of your research, all of your inspections of not only the property itself, but the equipment, the space, making sure that everything is up to code so that you can start strong. You don't have to end up, closing out the deal and then have to wait while you have construction contractors or whomever coming in, replacing equipment, all of that. That due diligence period is, in my opinion, crucial.
Yeah, and that due diligence period is what gives your lawyer the time to do the research into the contract for you. It gives you time to make sure that everything that was promised in the sale that you put your offer up for is actually in reality there. So another example in our situation, we use that due diligence period to check the equipment. So we brought in an expert who's an expert in coffee equipment, and we were told the place was turnkey. And he came in, and as he's inspecting, he says, I can't plug these machines in because the cord doesn't match the plug. And so something as simple as that to us is like, that's a pretty big red flag. Like, we were told this was turnkey, and now we can't even test the equipment that we're supposed to be buying because we can't turn it on.
Yeah, because now we need an electrician to come out and rerun wiring, because it may be a 120 and this particular piece of equipment requires a 240 voltage. So there's one thing I will add to the due diligence part of this is red flag number one is, and I didn't see it as a red flag at the time, is having the seller want to expedite. If you put in an offer and, with this kind of purchase, escrow periods are very much up to the seller and the buyer to agree upon on how long this escrow period is going to be. So for our case, we originally set up the escrow period with our offer to be 30 days. And upon submitting our offer, the seller wanted to reduce that to 3 weeks, which would only have given us a 10-day due diligence period to get everything done. We were excited. We wanted to move forward. We were gung ho, and we kind of had our blinders on to realizing that that was a red flag. And luckily, we were able to amend that contract and get that extended, and that was really in our favor. So that would be, in my opinion, a red flag. Make sure you give yourself enough due diligence period to truly get inspectors out there to inspect everything. Give your lawyer a chance to go into state and county records, local records, make sure there's no liens on any property or equipment, and that's crucial.
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, speaking of red flags, in our process, so we ended up in due diligence for approximately 6 weeks through extensions. And it felt like every week there was a new red flag and a new red flag and a new red flag. And some of it we saw immediately, like, whoa, no, that's not okay. And some of it, like Rodney said, hindsight's 2020, like, oh yeah, that was a red flag. When you're making a big decision like this and you're spending a lot of money, you got to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. There was one time where we had towards the end, where we had a conversation with our lawyer and our broker, and I just flat out asked, I said, what are we buying? Like, what is our money going to at this
Hmm.
point? And again, great lawyer, great broker. In a much more professional way, they basically said, we don't really know. You're buying the rights to something eventually, but not what you thought you were, essentially. And so, to me, that's saying, okay, we need to just rip the Band-Aid off. We, like Rodney said, we were gung-ho, we were really excited, we had our blinders on, we wanted to get in and get open and get moving. And we had to have the kind of a reality gut check, and say, okay, universe, we see, we hear, we get it. If we go forward with this, like, it's just gonna be nothing but bad news bears, and we're going to be in a bad situation. So using that due diligence to really listen to your gut, do all the research, do all of the due diligence that you need, to make sure that you feel really, really good about the purchase that you're making.
Absolutely. And here's another difference between acquisitions and a startup is you don't have those kinds of issues or hurdles to get over when you're doing a startup, but you do have to go through all of the legal processes to get those licenses and permits. And before you go and quit your job and start to do these things, it would really benefit you to look at every single type of license, permit, any kind of legal hurdle that you would need to get over. Look at the current processing time. So, like, one of the things that we didn't realize was how far behind the Division of Liquor Control was in their processing. And we discovered that it could be 6 months, right? So you might be thinking, like, I have a space, I have a business idea, I have the capital ready to go, and let's do this. I'm going to open my business in a month. All I have to do is submit my application to the Division of Liquor Control, and then we'll be good. No, you submit that application, and then such a long waiting period on some of these things. And I don't want to just throw the Division of Liquor Control under the bus. There's several different government agencies that you're going to have to work with at the federal, state, county, and your local municipality levels where, unfortunately, everybody's got their fingers in the pie, right?
Mhm.
And you're going to have to go through each one of these different stages, and any one of them could be dependent on one of the other ones. So if there's one that's taking an exorbitant amount of time to get processed, that's going to be a hindrance. So you have to be prepared for that. So before you go and make any kind of big move or decision, you definitely want to make sure that you know what your timeline is going to be. Build it out as much as you can. I think our timeline has shifted a few times, but ultimately, I think our timeline has been in a pretty good spot as far as built out with the understanding of all of the steps.
Yeah, and there's still variables, so you're going to need to be flexible. Flexibility is key, I think, when you're doing a startup. When we were in the purchasing piece of it where we're like, okay, well, we're getting a liquor license, we're going to have to just do a food inspection. We know the food inspection, takes X amount of time. We're going to need to get our products in place. We can do that in 2-3 weeks. And so we built out this timeline, and then because of the acquisition pieces, that it just kept kind of getting pushed back and pushed back. So then when we said, okay, we're not doing an acquisition anymore, we're just going to do a straight up startup. And we started looking at more just landlord opportunities and, working with a developer. Fortunately, our timeline didn't have to get shifted too much other than waiting for the contracts to all come in place. But once the contracts get signed, that's kind of like the jumping off point. It's like, okay, we have keys to the building. Now we can go and start doing X, Y, Z, and we know exactly what we need to be doing each week until we turn the keys to open.
Yeah, absolutely. And your business is uniquely yours. You may be working out of your home. You may be in a position where you are just seeing undeveloped land and you're building a building, structure from scratch. So there's all kinds of permitting in that way. But oftentimes I feel like with new businesses, you're trying to start off small and mitigate risk and expenses And one of the ways you can do that is leasing a space. So that's where landlords come in. Now, Janine, you mentioned, working with a developer. I just want to clarify a little bit, like what kind of developer, because there's like residential developers that are like building buildings and properties and whatnot. But the where we're working with is a little bit different.
A little bit different. So I've not seen a lot of organizations like the organization that we're working with right now. But so we're working right now with 3CDC. They are actually a nonprofit organization that has contracted with the city and the county to develop specific areas of downtown Cincinnati to make them urban destinations, put them on the map for travelers and for tourists, and to really help bring up and make Cincinnati, downtown Cincinnati, a lively destination. You know, if you don't know much about Cincinnati, we've got a pro baseball team, a pro football team, a pro soccer team, a minor league hockey team. We actually also have a women's professional football team and huge, huge arts.
Did you say soccer too?
Yeah, professional soccer.
We also have some really good college teams too.
Several D1 schools, several D2, D3 schools in the area, and a huge arts community, lots of venues for music. We have tons of big name musicians come through every year. And so it really is a destination, just diamond in the rough, so to speak, of the Midwest. And Three's been brought in. I don't exactly remember how long they've been around, but it's been at least a little over a decade at least, if not longer.
Their mission is to really revitalize the neighborhoods in the area that were once thriving, beautiful populations where you just wanted to go into these areas and you wanted to spend time, spend money, be with friends and family and enjoy yourselves. And through the years, like anything, if it's not well maintained, you're going to see a decrease in business, decrease in revenue, in tourism. And yeah, 3CDC's really been about revitalizing, rejuvenating the process, trying to build up small businesses, especially. They've been
Mhm.
really great working with us. And I know their mission is to work with local small businesses or local businesses in general, even larger ones, but trying to keep it local.
Yeah, so they work with both large businesses and small businesses, but really it's an interesting balance from a business standpoint of, bringing in the brand names and the notarized names that are going to draw people in while also supporting the small business no name folks who are, like us, just starting out, just trying to get our foot in the door, get a foothold and bring our concept to life. And so we've been working with them for the last about month and a half,
Yeah.
and they've been great. I think they've asked us a lot of really good questions. They've shown us really good spaces. They've worked really well with us and been very communicative to help us, make sure that we're getting into a space that is going to be both mutually beneficial for us and our concept and help us not just survive but strive, and also beneficial for them in helping accomplish their goals of making these districts within the downtown Cincinnati destinations for both locals and travelers.
Yeah, destination for fulfillment, if you will. No, but seriously, they have been great to work with. Compared to a traditional landlord, I would say ACDC has been great with trying to make sure that the people that they're working with are successful. They're not just in it to put somebody in the space and make sure that it's unoccupied for as little amount of time as possible so that they can make sure that they're getting their in and they're getting their revenue. No, they are doing their due diligence and us as a potential partner in this growth. So compared to a traditional landlord, they're working across the entire city, whereas a traditional landlord was probably going to maybe just be that one building, that one strip mall, that one space. They're really looking at things in a bigger picture. So those are some of the differences between purchasing a business versus starting a business, doing a business or creating a business outside of your home versus building a new structure on a vacant piece of land or going into a space that you're going to lease from somebody.
Yep. And when you're, speaking of landlord and looking for a space to lease, there's a couple different options there too. For us, we looked at a couple different spaces. And we looked at what they call first generation build outs. And then we also looked at spaces that was literally dirt floors that we would be able to build out ourselves
Hmm.
completely. Build out yourself where it's, dirt floors and wires hanging from the ceiling because it can really be your true vision to build the space exactly how you want it. That is very expensive. Because you have to put up the capital in order to do that. And then oftentimes the landlord will match or give you a lump sum, not give you a lump sum of money, but they will give you a budget to work within that says, okay, if you're going to come in, I own this space, you're going to build it out. I'll give you X amount of dollars to help with the build out, but you got to put some money in too. So it can get very expensive very quickly. They also expands your timeline because you're dealing with construction. And I know from my experience at least, construction timelines are never what we think they are. Whereas if you go into a second generation build out where someone built the space out themselves before you operated and now they're gone and you go in and it's still how they did it. And so basically you take what they've done and you can refurbish it, so to speak, to be in your concept or retrofit to your concept. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're
Hmm.
taking a space that's already built out. It's already got a full kitchen, it's got a bar, it's got seating areas, and we're going to go in and basically just do a makeover.
Give it a facelift, so to speak. Change some paint colors, wallpaper, maybe some upholstery on the furniture. Bring in, like we said, a couple pieces of new equipment like the espresso maker that we're gonna end up bringing in. But ultimately, it is a lot less than building up from the dirt floor where you're having to have every single wall built, every water line run, every electrical. And if you've ever been a part of like new construction, there's a lot of different aspects of it. There's plumbing, electrical, traditional build out, structural teams, and it's all in phases. I mean, there's going to be a part where the plumber is going to be able to come in and do A, B, C, but they can't get to D and E until the electrician comes in and does whatever part they're, responsible for. It can be a challenge.
And, we were talking about permits earlier, liquor license and food licenses. With a full build out, it's permits on permits on permits. Food license and liquor license, you're not even worried about when you're first starting because you got to get your building permits in place and you got to get your occupation permits in place and you got to get all kinds of other permits. And there's so many, pieces of the pie.
Hmm.
So it's a much longer, a much more expensive process.
Yeah, you can't even worry about a liquor license or food permit until you actually have a space that resembles a business that somebody from the city can come in and inspect,
Mhm.
right? They have to be able to inspect your operation. And if you're doing a full build out, guess what? You're going to be doing this for probably close to a year before you can even get in, your first customer in the door. But yeah, I mean, it's up to you and the kind of business that you want to open and what your vision is and what your circumstances are with funding, capital, investors. etc.
Yep. So once you've decided that you're going to open a business and you got your partner and you're working through, or even as or before you're working through finding your broker, finding your lawyer, finding your landlord, doing your due diligence, deciding if you're going to do an acquisition or be a startup. One key piece of your foundation that I believe in, and it personally is so, so important. And it's Rodney knows as my husband is my like number one rule, so to speak, in my life and in our relationship. And I think when we first started dating, I basically said, if we can't do this, we're not gonna we're not gonna make it. And that is open communication with
Hmm.
your partner. Can't have open, honest, and respectful communication with your partner. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but eventually something is going to crack and it is not going to end well for either of you. Open communication is key to any successful relationship, romantic, business, friendship, anything that ends in ship, it's got to start with communication.
And I wouldn't even say it's key. I would take it a step further and say that it's critical. It's like key to me is, well, this is key for success, whereas critical is this is key for survival,
Yeah.
right? So, but yeah, absolutely communication 100%. And we're not trying to say it's always sunshine and rainbows and compliments and all the goody two shoe lovey dovey stuff. I mean, there's going to be times where you disagree. There's going to be times where you are frustrated, you're angry, and not even at your partner. I mean, you could be frustrated or angry with something external, and if you're not communicating that with your partner about what's frustrating you when they say something or do something that might trigger and just put you just over the edge, you have the potential to blow up on a person that you truly care about. And it's not even their fault. And they don't know that because you haven't communicated what's going on outside of that relationship.
Yeah, and I think one of the big pieces about communication too is open listening and trying to understand what the person is trying to say to you, right? So it's not just being like, I'm having a bad day. Okay, cool, but we have to do XYZ today, so your bad day is going to impact me because I'm going to be walking on eggshells. So why are you having a bad day? I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and I have a crick in my neck. Okay, cool. Here's an ice pack. Go take an Advil and let's go do what we need to do, right? But if you just stop at I'm having a bad day, then everything else and the people around you are can be impacted by that. So listening openly, having those open conversations and, as I like to say, sit in the discomfort of the hard conversations.
And remember empathy. I know, Janine's kind of saying, okay, cool, in kind of a joking way, but, you make sure to have that empathy for the person and try and understand and do just exactly as she suggested is ask a follow-up question. Like, why are you having a bad day? Like, what can I do to help you? What do we need to change? Like, can we adjust our schedule to make something work? And it's not always going to be easy to make those adjustments. Sometimes you're not going to be able to make that kind of change to your schedule, that things are just going to have to happen, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, whether you're healthy or sick. There's things that you set in motion when you run a business or own a business that cannot be stopped because one person is having a bad day or one person is sick. But one thing I will say is with your business, one critical factor is going to be experience. You want to have that mentorship. Again, this is something that ends in ship, right? You want to be able to communicate with somebody who's been down the road that you're trying to go down, somebody to guide you, a Gandalf, if you will. to help you along the path. And you may have experiences and skills from other things that aren't directly related, but believe me when I tell you, there's something that you've done, that you've learned, that you've picked up over the years that is a transferable skill. So, one thing I have for me is I owned and operated a dry cleaning business years ago now. I mean, I ran it as a manager for about 6 years, and then I purchased it. It was a dry cleaning business, and then I purchased it from the retiring owners, and then I owned and operated it for about 4 years. And then I sold the business. While nothing to do with restaurant business, I mean, I gained a lot of valuable experience and knowledge and know-how through that process, working with vendors, suppliers, managing a team of people, managing a budget, inventory, paying the bills, and like all sorts of things. So don't sell yourself short. You have knowledge and experience. I guarantee you that you can take and transform, and not everybody's going to see it, but you can't do it by yourself. Find a mentor.
Yeah, find a mentor and also acknowledge the skill sets of and the strengths of your partner. So if
Mm.
if you have a partner in your business, acknowledge and identify the strengths in you and in them. So one of the things Rodney and I have talked a lot about is his experience running a brick and mortar at the dry cleaners. And he's been H HR, operations, finance, all of those things. I've not been an owner of a brick and mortar before. I've freelanced. I've been an individual contributor freelancer. So I've got experience working with customers and clients and that kind of stuff. But my strengths are I have a little bit of food and beverage industry experience, and I also have a lot of experience in marketing and communication and culture building and internal communications and that kind of stuff. And so, really, when we looked at my strengths versus Rodney's strengths, we were like, oh, we kind of like, yeah, yin and yang. Like, we puzzle piece a lot of these elements that you need to run a business really well. If we were both really good at being HR or both really good at being marketing, then that other piece of the pie is going to falter, right? And so we feel really good about where we're strong, and we also feel really good about where we're not so strong.
Yeah, yeah, you really gotta um, own your weaknesses also. Because if you don't own your weaknesses, you don't know when and where to ask for help.
Yeah. And, I think that can be really hard and really scary. And that kind of brings me to another piece of this open communication concept is acknowledging the fear and acknowledging the risk. A couple weeks ago, Rodney and I were at dinner or lunch or something, and I was just having a lot of mixed emotions about where we were at process. And to the point where like I was getting ready to submit my resignation, and my original plan was I'm not going to submit my resignation until we've signed on the dotted line and we have a space and we're getting ready to open, and then I would very last minute say, okay, I'm resigning. But there was a situation at my space, at my work, that I didn't want to be a part of anymore. It was like killing me inside. And so I had open communication with Rodney, and we said, you know what, it's okay. We have a little bit of a cushion. I can resign earlier than I anticipated. And I remember went to dinner, and there was one point where I'm like tearing up because I'm just in my feels. And I kind of put both hands down on the table in front of me and I said, I just really need us to acknowledge how risky and how scary this is right now. And I looked him straight in the face, and he was sitting across from me, and he put both hands down on top of mine, and he said, yes, we are acknowledging this is risky and it is scary, but it is the right thing, and we know that we are going to be successful, and we have each other, and we know that no matter what happens, we are going to face this challenge together. And I don't think if we didn't have this foundation of open communication, even that conversation, which can feel very, even that conversation can feel very scary,
Hmm.
could have happened. And, so when I say like sit in the discomfort of the hard conversations. Like, that's what I mean. Because if you're honest with yourself and you're honest with your partner and you can say the scary things out loud, it's going to help you, right? It's
Yeah.
going to keep you guys on the same page, make sure you know where the other person's at really any moment.
Yeah, and it doesn't benefit anybody to pretend like everything is sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't benefit you, you know, in the moment physically, mentally, financially to say, no, it's not scary. Like, you don't have, every now and then, you're gonna want to say to somebody, give them that word of encouragement that it's scary and all of that, but then there's times where you gotta acknowledge the hurt, acknowledge the fear, acknowledge the risk, and then evaluate it. Like, is what we are doing worth the risk, worth the fear, worth the hard moments and the stress? And ultimately we've determined for us, yes, yes, it is worth these risks because we have, the knowledge, the experience, the education. I mean, we're both college graduates. Not that that is something that is a requirement to run a successful business, but our educations are in mine is in understanding what makes people act the way they do in organizations and how to lead somebody through it. And Janine, yours is,
Public relations and graphic design and photography. And so, really, it's very similar, but it's on the external side of the house, understanding what makes people act the way that they do and how can you get people to engage with your brand and storytelling.
and I want to just take a second here to acknowledge we do not have children. Okay. And not that you can't start your own business if you have kids. You absolutely can. But when we're acknowledging those risks and those fears, those are risks and fears only to ourselves. We don't have dependents that we are also risking something for. So you really have to take your family situation into account as well. And I do not, by any means, I am not trying to discourage anyone from following their dreams or passion. In fact, following your dream and passion might be the very best thing you could do for your children to show them that anything is possible.
Yeah. And saying that, I like, if we had kids right now, I would probably be like, I definitely wouldn't have quit my job. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, not yet at
Not
least.
yet, at least. And I probably would have been like, let's have a little bit more of a buffer than we think we need. Because kids do stupid stuff all the time, right? Costs you money. But when we first started this journey, we took our dog for a walk. And at one point I said, we have to accept and we have to acknowledge that if this goes upside down, which it could, right? It could go upside down. It could not. There's a possibility in the universe that it could not work. We will do everything in our power to make it work. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if we are not successful, we could go bankrupt and we could lose everything. And are you and I willing to start over from scratch? And we both unequivocally said yes.
Mhm. Yeah, there's realistically, I mean, would it be hard? Would it be challenging? We probably sit with a sense of failure on our shoulders for a while. Yeah. But, I think both of us are the types where we've had setbacks in life and we've been resilient and we have bounced back. So I don't think that this is a bad idea. Even if it doesn't go the way we think, I believe that we have the ability to transition and transform ourselves into what we need to be successful.
And failure is just a lesson. It's not actually the end of the world.
Yeah, a lot of your biggest life lessons are going to come from the mistakes that you make along the way. So you learn to not do it that way again.
Yep.
But this kind of, let's transition a little bit into identifying roles and responsibilities. So we've kind of already touched base a bit on Janine. You have the PR and communications background. Yeah, I have the internal background with running a team of employees and HR and all of that. So let's kind of touch a little bit more on identifying those roles and responsibilities and talking about the 51% part.
Yeah, so Rodney and I are partners. Legally, we're 51-49 for various reasons, but the way we operate, we are 50-50 partners, right? So we believe in we're doing this together, 100% together. However, because of the different strengths that we have and that we've identified and the way that our strengths work together, I have this rule, and um, I don't remember exactly where I got it, from some management book or some leadership book a while back. But when you want to empower the people that report into you and you want to help them grow, there's this concept about giving them 51% of the decision making on any project. So going back into like a traditional corporate space, if you're a director and you have a manager and you want to give that manager an opportunity to grow and stretch and flex their wings, that's a weird thing to say. If you want to give them
Spread
spread
wings,
their wings, there you go.
flex.
Flex their muscles, spread their wings, then you basically say you get 51% of all decision making. I'm here for you to bounce ideas off. I'm here to mentor you, to give you guidance. But at the end of the day, you get 51% of the decision. So if we disagree and I think you should take option A and you think you should take option B, I am empowering you to go with option B, regardless of what I think. So when Rodney and I were sitting down and saying, okay, these are your strengths, these are my strengths, this is what you'll be in charge of, this is what I'll be in charge of. We're both very passionate about this project, about this company, and making it a success. We both don't always see exactly eye to eye.
No, yeah, absolutely. We don't always see eye to eye. And like you're saying in your example with like a director and a manager and giving the person that reports into you that 51%, you're not doing it and letting them make the decision that you don't agree with to watch them fail, right? You're giving them your 100% feedback, experience, knowledge, opinion, and letting them know why your position is opposite of theirs. And then you let them take all of that information, balance it with their knowledge and information and skills and experience, and ultimately come to the decision. But in our case, in the case of business partners, identifying those roles, we have to go into it ahead of time, acknowledging our different areas of expertise and saying up front that, like, if we disagree on this, I'm going to, back off and leave it to your experience because I acknowledge that you have more knowledge and experience in this area than I do.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this is branding versus the HR side of the house.
Mhm.
So my background's again public relations, marketing, communications, design, blah blah blah. So I have a lot of experience in branding, both visual and storytelling branding. So what that means is, in practice, that means things like the logo, the color choices, the merchandise, that all kind of falls under me. Things with Rodney for the HR side, because he has more of that human resources type experience, things like pay and benefits and job descriptions and
and all the things with documentation and knowing how and when things need to be filed, W-2s, W-4s, who are we 1099ing, all of those things, those kind of fall under my wheelhouse. And as well as we've determined that hiring and firing ultimately we are going to kind of divide the house front and back a little bit. Kitchen staff and out front bartending staff, barista staff. And we also plan on hiring a full-time kitchen manager, which is again acknowledging our of experience and wanting to fill that gap with somebody who has that experience.
yeah, so if there's a merchandise thing, Rodney as the finance person has given me a budget, thank you,
You're welcome.
for marketing. And if there's a design thing or if there's a product that I want to do or want to bring in, I get the final say on yes, this is the product, yes, this is the design we're going with, this is how many I want to buy, and this is what I want to sell the product at, as retail, but he gets the final say on, hey, this is your budget. And the final say, if I say, hey, I want to hire a social media manager, he gets to come over to me and say, we actually need to hire like 3 more bartending staff before we hire a social media manager.
Yeah, and like you said, we've allotted a budget, or you say I gave you a budget, but we've allotted a marketing budget, and I'm giving my input in the design and color schemes and stuff like that. But ultimately, I'm leaving it up to you to take my opinions and everything into consideration and just hearing me out. And I know and I trust you to ultimately make the best decision possible. Now, where this kind of overlaps in this case is when you say that you want to purchase so many pieces of merchandise and their unit price is, well, I'm just going to throw out a number. Say their unit price is $10 an item, and you want to purchase 50 of these items. Well, okay, that's $500 of your budget. Let's take into consideration what else we need to do and think, is this the reasonable amount? If you still say yes, because again, this is your area, your budget to work with, then fine. But if, me pulling in that financial side of it with the budgetary side of it, I may throw out a number and say, my recommendation would maybe not be 50. Let's cut it in half and do 25. What are your thoughts? And
Mm-hmm.
then she can come in here and tell me, nope, pound sand. I'm ordering 50, or, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's do 25, or, you know what? Let's negotiate and meet in the middle and we'll do 38.
Yeah. And then, on the opposite side of that, like we were working on the job description for the kitchen manager. And so that falls on Rodney. He went through, he made a job description and he said, "Hey, I've got it in here if you want to take a look." So I went in, I took a look. I, added a few things that I thought were important and then gave it back to him and ran him through, said, "This is what I added, what do you think?" And if he was like, "No, I don't want this in the job description," that's his right. I gotta back off. And we've had a few, not a lot, but I think we've had a few where we've kind of gone back and forth, and we finally had to say, "Nope, this is yours. It's
Yeah.
51%. Here you go."
And explain the why. Like, you have a why that you're starting a business, that you're running a business. You have a why for why you want to do something. When you added those items into the job description, you didn't just say, hey, I added this and I added this and I added this and leave it at that. You took the time to say, I added this because this is the why. right? And hear your partner out. Like, don't just say, you're changing what I did and I don't like it. Listen to the why they did it and hear them out. And because, I mean, ultimately, in this case, with the job description, like, I think you are absolutely right. There was one thing that I overlooked, and then there was a couple things that were additions that made it better, that weren't necessary, but definitely improved it. And and then there was the one piece of the puzzle that I overlooked and I should have had in there, but you caught it for me. That's why we're partners.
And I think that to me brings to mind another really good thing is you got to set aside your ego. We've all got egos. Even if you think you don't have an ego, you've got an ego. And especially when you're working with a partner, especially when you're leading a team or we're working on bringing in another, leadership person as our kitchen manager, you can't have an ego. If you really want it to be successful, you've got to be open to hearing out your partner. That's part of communication. That's probably the biggest part of communication is listening. And so giving up that responsibility and giving up
Giving up that 1%.
that 1%. And it probably sounds a little ridiculous listening. You're like, oh, it's just like 1%. But it actually can feel a lot, especially when you're very passionate about it, when you're very, just when you're really bought in. Rodney a couple times this past week has been like, well, you're the CEO, I'm just the COO. And to me, I'm like, well, that feels ridiculous. But based off of, kind of where we've landed,
Mhm.
it makes sense. I just call myself an owner. But
And ultimately, part of the reason why I call you the CEO is because this was your baby. Like, you had the original vision. Sure, we've changed the vision a little bit. We've made modifications. We've molded and shaped it into what we think is going to ultimately speak to us and speak to our target audience and speak to what the community might be missing. So I call you the CEO mainly for that reason, but ultimately I see myself as much more the logistical, running the operations, so to speak, as far as trying to manage budgets and inventory and whatnot while you are, building some of those relationships with suppliers and whatnot. I'm there too and working on that, but ultimately you build the relationship and then I bill them or they bill me and, we determine how much we're going to purchase.
I think it speaks a lot to our individual personalities too. I'm very creative and my head's in the clouds a lot, and Rodney is my anchor that kind of keeps me grounded and brings, I don't want to say reality checks me a lot, but makes sure that my head's not floating off into space.
I bring the math.
Yeah.
That's the part. It's not the reality. I bring the math. I said, I'll be like, you realize that what you're saying is, oh, yeah, let's do this. Well, that's $10,000. Like, maybe not. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, definitely bring the math part of it. So you can have all the, brilliant ideas in the world, and you do. But ultimately, if the math ain't mathin',
So math and it ain't gonna happen.
right?
But yeah, so I think that kind of covers everything we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah. So building a strong foundation for your business is nothing structural as far as a building. You're building a foundation of trust. You're building a foundation of communication, of research, acknowledgement of each other's skills, your education, your background, identify what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Again, Janine mentioned researching what the costs are going to be of certain things, the market rate is on certain things, how much can you expect realistically in sales, what are these different government organization or not organization government entities going to require of us? What do we need so that we can get all of our ducks in a row before day one, before we open our doors? So start with a strong foundation, and ultimately I think it's a strong foundation of trust and open communication is the biggest part.
Trust, open communication, doing your research, understanding what you're getting into, and seeking a counselor, not seeking a mentor, seeking a mentor. We've been very lucky to have some great friends and some great professional acquaintances and colleagues who are in full support of us
Yep.
and who have experience in areas we don't, that are, happy to make connections for us and happy to just be a sounding board for us. And those relationships they're priceless, and for me, like, I know people who have all these skill sets that I don't have, and making the ask is so hard. And again, acknowledging the difficulty and the fear and the risk. But at the end of the day, like, people want to help people, right? Like,
Hmm.
people like helping people. So find a mentor, even if it's just like your friend group. We have a friend group that we've now dubbed the Brood. And, when we can't decide something, or we're trying to figure something out, or, we just have a random idea, we shoot it over to them and get
Yep.
their feedback. They've helped us help connect us with some folks that they know for different things. So find people who are rooting for you, and turn them into your advisory council.
Right. Yeah. And, make sure to weigh the benefits, the risks involved in what you want to do, and make sure that all of everything you're bringing to the table, whether that's finances, knowledge, experience, is going to outweigh the risks involved and what your personal situation is as far as your home life and whatnot. It might not make sense for you right now, but that doesn't mean it won't make sense for you a year from now. I think people oftentimes overestimate what you can get done in a year, but underestimate what you can get done in a decade,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You think about, oh, I'm gonna launch a business and we're gonna be $1 million business in the first year. That's not realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible, but it's not realistic. But in 10 years, I mean, we could not just be $1 million business, but we could maybe have two or three locations that are all doing more than $1 million, right? So don't be so short-sighted to think that if now's not the right time, it will never be the right time. But yeah, and definitely, like you were saying, lean on those friend groups, lean on the people that you have in your circles. Make sure your circle's a little small though. That's one thing I will say is don't tell everybody you know what your next move is, what your plan is, because you need to make sure you're telling the people that are going to support you. And I'm not telling you to just say, hey, I'm only going to tell the people that I know are to tell me what I want to hear, but tell the people that are going to be good sounding boards and, not just be naysayers.
If you have a friend who seems to always poo-poo your ideas, I would say tell that friend, because don't listen to them if they say, don't do it, it's too risky, and you know that this is what you're going to do. But tell them when you're like, hey, I'm thinking I want to serve only vodka at my bar. And they're going to be like, why would you do that? Nobody's going to want just vodka drinks at a bar. Gotta have something else, right? So their little negative Nancy attitude can actually be beneficial, but you also want the very like cheerleady, supporty type people too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ones that are going to give you those reality checks and make
Yeah.
sure that you're aligned and, moving in the right direction.
Find a balance, people.
That
Yeah.
way, your ultimate destination can be fulfillment. So we thank you for listening. We hope that you join us next time, and we hope to bring you more exciting news and helpful information.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.